That was way too stressful for a September afternoon, but Arsenal, despite being pegged back, found a way to take all 3 points versus Leicester City. Were we lucky, or are we just inevitable these days? What happened to our defensive solidity? Where was our efficiency in front of goal? We'll get into all that, plus a bunch of individual performances on this episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Hey everybody, happy Sunday. Hope you're all good. Hope you're all well. Thank you for joining me on the Chronicles of a Gooner, the Arsenal podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeou. We are streaming to you live on this cold Sunday morning. It's really cold. This is the first time, I'd say, probably since like February, March time that I've come down to the man cave and I'm cold. Normally during the winter, I kind of expect it. So I make sure that I put the heating on before I come down here. And then it's at a decent level in terms of the temperature and I can kind of, get by. Whereas today, I came in here completely not expecting it to be this cold and I'm bloody freezing. I'm shivering. Well, I've got over the shivers a little bit. Hopefully we warm up as we get through it. As I say, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. Where do we even kind of start with that one? Wednesday night was nice and comfortable, and that was supposed to be the start of a stress-free run of fixtures. But oh no, that wasn't going to be the case, was it? After total domination in that first half, we found ourselves desperately searching for a winner in stoppage time. That wasn't how it was supposed to go. And our Patreons who tuned into the Matchday reaction pod yesterday will know exactly how emotionally drained I was by the end of it. I really, really struggled with that last sort of 10 minutes of the game. Up until we got to the last 10 minutes, I was pretty relaxed. Like, yeah, okay, we were 2 goals to the good. We were cruising and we'd been pegged back. But there was a part of me that always felt like we were going to score. But obviously, the closer and closer you get to the end of the game without having done that, the more you start to worry. And when we got to the last 10 minutes, I started to think it wasn't going to be our day. And I think, look, in a weird way, Manchester City dropping points, which we'll talk about in a little bit more detail later on, should have made it not okay, but more bearable. The fact that we might have dropped points. But instead, it was the opposite, because you know that these opportunities to make up ground on Manchester City are very, very few and far between, because they're such a good side and they win so many football matches that you know that these opportunities aren't going to come along very often. And so when they do, and yes, look, I talked the other week about how the balance of the fixtures and who you're playing in relation, I beg your pardon, to who they're playing, it means that certain weeks will go in certain ways. And so I kept saying that for us to be 2 points behind them, having gone there, having gone to Spurs, having gone to Villa, was not by any stretch of the imagination disastrous and was really nothing to worry about. But obviously that kind of flip reversed this weekend, where they had a really difficult away game up at St James's Park and we had what needs to be, if you want to win the Premier League title these days, a home banker. And so this was a weekend in which we could always potentially make up some ground on Manchester City. So then when you get to the point late in the game where it looks like that winner isn't coming and you know that they've dropped points earlier in the day, maybe, some people will say it makes the idea of dropping points yourself more bearable because they haven't made up any more ground on you. But to me, it would have felt even worse because it would have felt like a real big opportunity missed. And we're not going to get that many of them, as I keep saying. So you got to take them when they come along. And yeah, it was really stressful in the end. It was, as I said right at the top, way too stressful for a September afternoon. This is the kind of stress that you expect to go through in April, May, not in September. I've been very, very careful not to overreact to certain results and certain things over the past few weeks because it is very early in the season and I don't want to fall into that trap. But this was a game that had me really worried at one stage and really bloody panicked. Remember, if you want to check out the Matchday Reaction Pod, which comes to you on the match day, shortly after the full-time whistle, you can sign up to the Chronicles of a Gooner Patreon. The link is in the description below. It's patreon.com/the Chronicles of a Gooner. You heard me speaking to Mike Arteta and my initial thoughts after the full-time whistle. But anyway, let's start with the first period. Let's start with the team selection. It was the same side that Mikel Arteta picked up at Manchester City. Trossard returned from his suspension. Timber came in at right back, and Raya managed to shake off the issue that he picked up at City last weekend. The first half was complete and utter domination. That's the only way to describe it. To me, it was textbook Arteta ball. Did we score as many goals as we'd have liked? No, but we created openings. We pressed high, and that was as intense as I'd seen us all season, really. Leicester would kind of try and break out, sometimes through the midfield, through Harry Winks, and as soon as he got the ball, there was a swarm of Arsenal players around him to stop that from happening. If they tried to go long, Saliba and Gabriel would eat it up, and Arsenal had Leicester pinned back for long, long periods. I think when I checked the possession stats at halftime, and I know it's not all about possession stats, as Manchester City found out last weekend, but we had like 77% of the ball in that first period. We had lots of attempts at goal. We created lots of openings, lots of moments. And we really ought to have been clear by the time, we found the breakthrough. In the end, it took us around about 20-odd minutes, I think, to find the breakthrough through Gabriel Martinelli. And we'll talk about that goal because, first of all, you got to give immense credit to Jurrien Timber, who, again, we're going to talk about a little bit later on in the pod. He's one of the people that I want to highlight for a kind of, special segment. He was fantastic to me. I thought he was really, really good yesterday, and we'll get on to why I think he's better at right back than he is at left back. It's only natural. It is his right side, isn't it? But he puts in a wonderful ball into the penalty area. And what I really love about this goal was that Martinelli kind of had the presence of mind to realise that the pass was probably going to be something of a cutback rather than a ball whipped across the edge of the 6-yard box. And I think in the situation that Martinelli's been in recent weeks, where he's been desperate, really, really desperate to get on the score sheet, he did snatch at a couple of opportunities prior. He had one that he put over the top of the crossbar. He really ought to have done better with. He had another effort that was saved at the near post. I can't remember if that was before or after the goal, Hermansen making the stop there. But I think when you're desperate for a goal, you can snatch at those opportunities, and it's very easy to think, I need a goal, so I'm going to get my head down and I'm just going to charge towards the goal when I'm anticipating a cross like that and hope that it comes off me, hope that I can get a toe to it, a foot on it, something on it just to divert it in. But he showed a bit of composure there, and he showed some really, really good awareness and good anticipation, really, of what was going to come. And when the ball comes back to him, he knows that the power's on the cross from Timber. He knows that Timber's done a lot of the work there, and all he needs to do is just make sure that he guides it in towards that far corner, and he does exactly that, and he gets his goal. I was so chuffed for Gabriel Martinelli because over the last few weeks, nobody has embodied Arsenal's work rate, the work ethic, the togetherness, the unity, the selflessness, more than Gabriel Martinelli. He's been playing like a left back. He's been charging up and down the pitch. He's been impacting games in the final third like he did against Manchester City, but he's also been a huge asset to us in the defensive third. And when a player is going through a period like that, you do feel for them because you look at them and you think, you are doing a really good job for the team. And there's a reason that Mikel Arteta keeps picking you. There's a reason that he's selecting you ahead of Leandro Trossard, because he thinks, and I'm talking about on that left wing, because he thinks that you can give us something on that left flank that nobody else in this group can. Not even the decorated, incredibly successful Raheem Sterling. Gabriel Martinelli gives you something else. He gives you that raw pace. He gives you the ability to stretch teams, and he gives you that directness that I think at times, without Martin Odegaard especially, we lack. So it's really, really imperative that he's in the team. But everybody kept talking about the lack of goals this season. So to get off the mark yesterday was really, really important for him, because with every passing week that he doesn't get his first goal, that he doesn't open his account, the louder that conversation becomes and the more it starts to weigh on his mind. So brilliant to see him get the goal. Jurrien Timber, who was the provider of that goal, as I say, just looks so much better at right back than he does at left back. He created 7 chances from full back yesterday. Now, I know you got to factor in the opposition and the fact that they're probably expected to fight relegation come the end of the season. And because they were offering very little in attack, it meant that Jurrien Timber had a lot more freedom to get up and down that flank and impact the game in the attacking third. But I just thought he was relentless in the way he was stepping forward, winning challenges. He'd make overlapping runs for Bukayo Saka. You saw it in the build-up to that goal. Saka picks up the ball and he starts to carry it sort of slightly inside, and Jurrien Timber spots the opportunity, spots the space, gets his head down, watch the goal back again, and he makes this charge out to the right-hand side, and Saka obviously knows that run is coming, can kind of feel his presence as he makes the run around him, and he just puts it into his path, and Timber delivers the goods. He does seem way more comfortable at right back to me than he does at left back. He was really, really good at Manchester City, and he was really, really good again yesterday. Defensively, I think he's just as good as he is when he plays on the left-hand side. I think on the left-hand side, you probably get a slightly more solid version of Jurrien Timber, because I think the fact that he's playing on his wrong side, bear with me here, makes him think twice about some of the runs he makes, and I think he opts for the safety-first approach more often because he fears being caught in a situation where he's on his wrong side and he can't necessarily deal with it in the way he'd like. So I think Timber's probably slightly more solid when he plays at left back, but I think Timber at right back is a far more complete fullback, and I think does a really, really good job there. And I was looking at Jurrien Timber yesterday as well, sort of up close, and obviously, you know, he was someone that was signed from Ajax who had played predominantly in his career up until that point as a fullback. As a centre-back. And I look at Jurrien Timber and I think he's incredibly powerful. He's really strong. He's really stocky. But he just doesn't have the height to play at centre-back for me. And I think that's something that plays on Mikel Arteta's mind. We know how highly he values physical presence. We know that he likes his centre-backs to be dominant in that sense. And I look at Jurrien Timber and I just think, although he was brought in as a centre-back, and a lot of people feel that he could spend a lot of time if things work out in a certain way playing at centre-back, I don't think that's Mikel's intention for him. And I think, you know, that wouldn't be unprecedented. You think about Ben White, who also came in as a centre-back and now is very much a full-back in this Arsenal side. Can he be used as an emergency centre-back? Yeah, of course he can, but that's not where we see him. So I think we need to get out of this mindset of Jurrien Timber, the full-back, but also centre-back, and think he's a full-back that can cover at centre-back rather than him being sort of earmarked for both of those positions. I really do believe that's how Mikel Arteta sees it. Then right on the stroke of half-time, of course, Arsenal managed to get their second goal of the afternoon, and I felt really, really comfortable at this point. Martinelli, again involved, coming down that left-hand side, cuts the ball back. Calafiori lets it run, and there's Leandro Trossard to do what Leandro Trossard does, which is stay really calm, really composed, open up his foot, spot the space in the goal, and just side foot it in. And at that point, you go in at the break and you think, this is done. This is done. You think this is finished. There's no contest here now. And, you know, we got PSG coming up on Tuesday, and maybe we'll be able to give some of these key players a bit of a breather. We've got a little bit more depth back on the bench now, and you can make those changes and you can maintain a good enough level to preserve the 2-goal lead. But our start to the second half, which we're going to come on to in a bit, was really sloppy, was really poor, and we created a mountain for ourselves to climb. Just to finish off on the first half, though, and I'm going to dive into the live chat in a minute and get some of your thoughts, so make sure that you keep them coming. I just want to highlight the Calafiori and Martinelli partnership. It seems to work really, really well. They've played 2 games together now, and Martinelli's got 1 goal and 2 assists in those games. And I do think that Martinelli's coming back into a bit of form. Sometimes you have to trust players to play their way back into form, and Mikel Arteta's trusted him. And while he's not been at his brilliant best in the final third, he's managed to offer lots elsewhere in the team, which is great. But I think there is something to be said for the impact that Ricardo Calafiori being in the side has on Gabriel Martinelli. You have got a guy in Calafiori who is very, very similar on the ball to Alexander Zinchenko. And if you think about when Martinelli was playing his best football for the club, it was with Zinchenko behind him. Now, when I say he's similar, I think they're very different in terms of their profiles. But Calafiori is very comfortable on the ball, like Zinchenko. Calafiori prefers to pick up the ball and drift infield rather than making overlapping runs, which I don't think is the same necessarily for Jurrien Timber when he plays at left back. I think we saw him try to go infield quite a bit. I always go back to the Villa away game where I thought he did that and he struggled. And that was partly because Villa did a really good job of shutting out the passes into him. But I just thought that day he looked a little bit uncomfortable. And there's been other occasions where Timber, for me, hasn't looked 100% when being asked to drift inside. Timber on the outside, though, as we saw on the right yesterday, can be a really useful weapon. But Calafiori likes to come inside. And when he comes inside, he draws attention. And it means that the guy who would normally assist the fullback and double up on Gabriel Martinelli has got something different to think about. If you remember, Alexander Zinchenko, not that long ago, gave an interview with Rio Ferdinand and he spoke about what the plan is with Martinelli and why Zinchenko is always tasked with going inside. And this is what he said. He said, my job is to go in field and draw the attention, to pull people in towards me because I'm creating an overload. And if I'm creating an overload and a right midfielder looks inside and sees his midfield getting swamped, his natural instinct and the right thing to do is to go out and to support. But if I've got the technical ability, if I understand when the right point is to release the ball, then I can create a scenario where I'm causing Martinelli to isolate his fullback 1v1 over and over and over again. And that's what Calafiori does that Zinchenko does. But guess what? Calafiori can defend. And that's the difference. So Calafiori goes inside. He brings out he brings in the wide player as well with him. And then he's got that presence of mind to be able to pop it out to that left-hand side nice and early and give Martinelli the 1v1 that he craves. Because 1v1, I would back Martinelli to take on anyone. I think, is he the most skillful player? Maybe not. But the way he can kind of start from 0 and go to sort of 0 to 60 very quickly, the way he can put his foot on the ball and then go again and burst left or right, the way he can do all of those things makes him so difficult to deal with. The fact that he will come inside you if you give him the opportunity, but guess what? He's more than happy to go around the outside of you and go the long way round as well. And he still backs himself. He backs his pace to be able to go the long way around and still come out on top. So I think you give him those 1v1s. You create those situations for him, then you get the best out of Gabriel Martinelli. It's as simple as that. When you have a fullback that doesn't do that, then it means that Gabriel Martinelli is playing in a game that just doesn't suit his powers. And he ends up picking up the ball and instantly he's got two players around him. And as I say, I don't think he's the trickiest customer. And I don't think he's got the best vision. I don't think he's Martin Odegaard, for example, in terms of his vision to be able to pick out passes from half spaces and things like that. But what he does have is an ability to beat a man, a directness. And if you can give him and create those situations for him, he will make them count. And he's doing that. Relationships and combinations on the pitch are so, so important. Let's take some of you guys' thoughts from the live chat. Paul James says, games like yesterday's are heart attack vehicles. Leicester scored 2 freak goals, but we found a way to win. I don't get that from late bloomer stories. Explain that to me and I'll read it out. Ghost of Sparta says, afternoon to you from my part of the continent, Harry. Can't wait to see that grin smile on your face. Ollie Skip should have been sent off, says Paul. We'll address that a little bit later on. Sammy says, I am so happy that he got a goal and an assist. I hope it's the beginning and not a fluke. I think it is the beginning. Thomas and Friends Frankie says, I wonder if Harry will be discussing consistency this week. Calafiori, second yellow. Are we calling corruption? We'll get on to all of that stuff. Don't worry. Don't worry. I've got all of that up on my sleeve. And if I do somehow forget to address those situations, make sure you're telling me and you're hammering it into the comment section. Lots of calls for likes on the video. Guys, if you haven't done so already, please do leave a like on the video. There's hundreds of you with me live right now. The likes don't reflect that, unfortunately, and I'd really, really love your support in that sense. So yeah, like, subscribe, leave us a review as well, because as I mentioned, we lost a load of our reviews on Apple Podcasts when we made a transition from a network to independent, and that's really, really disappointing because they're really, really helpful. We had about 400 on the board, and now we've only got like 140, so I don't know what's happened. So even if you've left a review before, please leave one again so that we can get back those reviews that we've lost, because they're really, really powerful. And also, if you're not signed up on Patreon and you're interested in accessing some more Chronicles of Aguna content, you can do that via the link in the description. We're going to come on to the second half in just a minute. We'll talk about all those incidents that you guys are highlighting in the chat, and we'll have a dedicated Q&A section on today's pod as well. But I just want to remind you guys that this podcast is brought to you by NordVPN, the best VPN service out there. It's a service that I myself have plenty of experience using, and you can sign up now via the link below. Visit nordvpn.com/ChroniclesAFC for a mega discount and 4 months free at the end of your plan. With NordVPN, not only do I have extra protection when surfing the web, downloading and streaming, but I also have the ability to change my virtual location with the click of a button. That means I can access content that's geo-blocked, use streaming services that are not available in the UK, and when I'm traveling, I'm able to log into my Sky Go, TNT Sports, and BBC iPlayer, meaning I don't miss a beat. Sign up now via nordvpn.com/ChroniclesAFC and take advantage of this amazing offer. Plus, with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee, it's totally risk-free. You won't regret it. nordvpn.com/ChroniclesAFC. Okay, then let's get on to that second half. It was a sloppy start to the second half. There's no getting away from that. There's no point in pretending it was anything other than that. But I do think, and I've said this before, so I want to be consistent with it, I do think the surroundings have an impact here. And you might be thinking, oh, they're professionals and they should come out ready to go and they shouldn't be switched off and they shouldn't be, going at 5 miles an hour. What they actually should be doing is coming out and starting with the same intensity that they started the first half. What's the difference between starting the beginning of the game and starting the second half? Well, first of all, I think everybody in the stadium, probably including the players, and maybe to their detriment, felt that this game was done and dusted at the break. Everybody felt really, really confident that Arsenal were going to see it through, that the game and the outcome of the game, the result at least, had been decided, and it was a case of, can Arsenal get a few more? Will they rest some players? Etc., etc. I don't think anybody in their wildest dreams thought that Leicester City were going to be able to get back into the game, and credit to them because they did exactly that. But the fact that you come out to play that second half and the atmosphere's flat, there's so many people not back in their seats from half time, I think that plays a part. And if you come out as the opposition and you're on it, you can capitalise on that slow start. And that's exactly what Leicester City did. Now, Vardy won a free kick right at the start of the half, which led to James Justin's first goal. And the reason I say Vardy won the free kick rather than Arsenal conceding it is because I've watched it back a few times and I just don't know really what William Saliba could do any differently. Jamie Vardy is one of the best in the business at engineering contact. Now, I'm not calling the guy a cheat or going after him. I think he's very, very clever in the way that he does it. And, it's served him very, very well throughout his career. It's served Leicester City very well. How many penalties has Jamie Vardy won for Leicester City over the years by doing exactly what I'm describing? He can see where Saliba's running. He can see where the ball's going, and what he opts to do is divert his path so that he runs across William Saliba's stride. And if you're running at full tilt, at full pace, you're not going to give him the space because it's Jamie Vardy. You know you can't afford to give him a head start, regardless of his age. The guy is rapid. And so you need to try and keep up the pace. And William Saliba does exactly that. And then Vardy runs across his stride and he catches him and he goes down and Saliba picks up the yellow card. And you could see straight away that Saliba just kind of accepted the yellow card. He didn't argue. He didn't even, complain one bit because he knew that Vardy was getting away and he knew that he was in a situation where he was lucky to have escaped with just conceding a free kick and picking up a yellow card. So, that was where it kind of started from. And then the goal comes about from a cross into the box from a kind of deep position out on that left-hand side. And you can see, if you watch it back again, Arsenal were unusually lax in their defensive approach from a set piece. I can't remember the last time I looked at Arsenal and their defensive work around a set piece and went, that was shoddy. But this was the case with this particular instance. The cross comes in and Justin goes to meet it, and you can see there's this kind of awkward space between Kai Havertz and James Justin. Is Kai Havertz supposed to go out and challenge for the ball? Is he protecting a certain zone in the box? The truth is, we don't really know what exactly he's been tasked with doing there. But that bit of space that Arsenal afford James Justin means that he can win the header. And then obviously he gets a fortunate deflection, which wrong foot David Raya because he's already leaning the other way. He's put all his weight on the other side. It's very difficult to shift that weight back the other way and make the save. And at that point, I was really pissed off that we'd given away our clean sheet, especially for FPL purposes, given that I've stacked my team with Arsenal defensive players because I trust us nowadays in that sense, which was never the case in the past. But I thought to myself, yeah, I'm annoyed and I'm frustrated, but not in my wildest dreams do I think that Leicester are going to go on and find the equaliser. And we go down the other end and we create lots and lots of chances. We have plenty of opportunities to restore our 2-goal cushion. Gabriel's header saved, Timber blazing over the bar from the rebound, Trossard hitting the post shortly after that. And then comes the goal that levels it, the goal that squares it all up. And it was James Justin, again, forward from fullback. I think he said himself in his Match of the Day interview, he scored a few goals in his time, but never 2 in one game. And you watch that, and I think you can start to, again, pick holes in Arsenal defensively, which, again, feels like a real rare occurrence these days, but we're going to do it because we should do it this time around. The cross comes over from Wilfred Ndidi from the left-hand side. And listen, first of all, you got to take your hat off to James Justin for the technique because that is an unbelievable goal. I think Mikel Arteta in our radio interviews called it a worldie, and that it was. The way he kind of comes onto it, it's a kind of difficult angle because if you hit it dead straight as you approach it that way and your follow through is dead straight, you end up dragging it well wide. You end up hitting the corner flag. So what you kind of need to do is you need to slice across the board. It's really, really difficult to find that sweet spot between slicing it enough to alter the direction, but making sure that you still get that clean contact. And it's got the power then essentially to beat the goalkeeper. And it was just technically unbelievable, like really, really good. But my question was immediately, who the hell was supposed to be tracking James Justin into the box? And I'm a little bit confused here as to who should be blamed. Some people in the aftermath of the game pointed the finger at Ricardo Calafiori, which I think is unfair because Ricardo Calafiori is dealing with the forwards, and as a fullback who is a centre-back naturally, I think he does the right thing by tucking in to try and protect sort of the width of the 6-yard box. I always say that you need to protect the sort of width of your area first and foremost. If you can't do that, you need to protect the width of your 6-yard box, because then if you're letting someone roam free, the angle is more difficult, and that, of course, reduces the chances of them scoring. So I think Calafiori does the right thing theoretically there by tucking inside. But he'll be expecting someone to have tracked the run of James Justin from fullback into the penalty area, and nobody does. The closest player was Leandro Trossard, and he's sort of around about the edge of the area when James Justin gets the strike off, and I wonder if it was him who should have been following Justin from the off. But then at the same time, Trossard wasn't playing on the left. Martinelli was at that point in the game. Did they temporarily swap roles and then it would have been Trossard's responsibility? The truth is I don't know, so I don't really want to go too big on any one individual, but the goal comes from the fact that A, James Justin has pulled an absolute worldie out of the bag, but B, whoever's supposed to be tracking him has just completely left him. And so you can look at Ricardo Calafiori, but I think he does the right thing in theory by stepping inside and trying to narrow the spaces in the more central areas of the penalty box. And that's what he does. And then again, after that, we have more chances. More. We're knocking on the door. We never felt, I didn't think anyway, at any point that Leicester were going to go up the other end and score the winner. It was just a case of whether Arsenal could do it. And on the 94th minute, we finally get the winner. And I can tell you that Emirates Stadium, for those of you that weren't there, went mad. Was it Reece Nelson levels against Bournemouth? Probably not. I wouldn't say it was that. But I would say that it was pretty good and pretty amazing, the way the kind of roof just came off at that point. But I think the difference is, right, is that over time, we've developed this kind of inevitability. And I think for the first time in a long time, you can turn up at the Emirates Stadium now, and when we face adversity like we did yesterday, when we get pegged back the way we did yesterday, the crowd doesn't turn. There isn't those moans and groans when the ball is given away. There's there's a real support that comes across. And I think that's partly due to the fact that people actually believe that we're going to go and get that goal nowadays. Now, I was doing the game for radio, and my producer in my ear was saying, don't worry, you're going to score, you're going to score, you're going to score. It's fine. It's coming. We've created this kind of inevitability. And with that comes a belief. And with that belief comes that never say die attitude that we've seen Arsenal display time and time again. And in the end, we got what I think our overall performance deserved. And it's quite clever from Leandro Trossard as well, because people will point to the luck element of the goal. And there's a lot of luck involved. You know, comes off of the inside of Wilfred Ndidi's left leg, and ends up beating the goalkeeper who had been in inspired form all afternoon. And we'll talk a little bit about Mads Hermansen in a bit. But you look at it again, and I only kind of really started to think about it this way when I watched Match of the Day back this morning for the second time. And the corner comes over, and we've got really, really good at these corners where we drop it in towards that far post area and we send Gabriel charging in to cause chaos. What Trossard does very cleverly is he kind of peels off a little bit and he just allows himself a bit of space at the far post. And he'll watch the way the ball's coming down, and you can see it in his face when you see the reverse angle and you watch Leandro Trossard and how he approaches the ball in this instance. There isn't that intent to welly it back towards the goal. There isn't that intent to kind of put his foot through it and, try and take the net off. That's not what Leandro Trossard sets out to do there. What Leandro Trossard recognises is that Arsenal have caused the chaos in that area already. The fact that they've got runners going in there, the fact that Gabriel has come steamrolling in there from that penalty spot position that he does. He's come round on the outside. He's dragged defenders with him. We've got players already there that are seeking to block certain channels, prevent the goalkeeper getting out to it, etc., etc. Trossard knows that all he needs to do in order to give his team a chance is to just calmly guide it back into that danger zone. He doesn't need to put his foot through it and risk blazing it over the bar. He doesn't need to put his foot through it and risk getting it horribly, horribly wrong. What he needs to do is put the ball back into that danger zone. And that's exactly what Leandro Trossard does. He opens up his foot and he just cushions it back into that area. And we get the stroke of luck that I think our performance deserved overall. And into the back of the net it goes. The place goes mental. And Arsenal have their third goal and what will be the winner, but for the fourth, which we'll come on to talk about in just a second. The fourth goal was great. I enjoyed it. I'm glad that Havertz continued with his good form at the start of this season. I always get frustrated when people criticise Kai Havertz for goal scoring, because actually, if you go back to sort of January and you fast forward up until now and you review that period of time, he's been very, very effective in front of goal. And, he did miss a chance in that second half where his volley was saved by Hermansen. He wasn't the only one that was denied by Leicester's Danish goalkeeper. But I know that people would have come away from the game saying, if we didn't win it, Kai Havertz missed that chance. As if Trossard didn't miss some, Martinelli didn't miss some, Xhaka didn't miss some, because he's the one that everybody always points at when it comes to a lack of efficiency in front of goal. That goal was very obviously onside. I find it baffling that it took so long for the officials on duty yesterday to establish that the ball had come off of James Justin. I could see it in real time. James Justin kicked the ball against Kai Havertz. Yes, Kai Havertz was standing in an offside position, but that is cancelled out when it is played by a defender. It wasn't a deflection. It wasn't unintentional. James Justin clears the ball onto Kai Havertz. And into the back of the net it goes. And what I love is that it sort of comes off his thigh. And it's so awkward. And he's another player probably after that touch would just smash it into the back of the net to make the goal look a little bit tidier, but not Kai Havertz. It comes off him. He knows it's going there. He just runs along behind it to make sure that nobody can get back and clear it. 4-2. I would say that given we scored the third goal in the 94th minute, that maybe that scoreline flatters us. But then I look back at the number of chances we had, the amount of attempts at goal, the amount of saves that Mads Hermansen had to make during that game. And I think, no, it doesn't flatter us. In fact, it doesn't tell the story of the game, because we should have had 6s and 7s yesterday against this Leicester City side, and we should never have conceded 2 goals. But football's a funny old game. That's how it goes sometimes. So, really, really pleased at that point. There's a couple of players that I do want to talk about. I do want to give an honourable mention to Leicester City's goalkeeper, Mads Hermansen. I know this is an Arsenal podcast, but he made 13 saves, which was the most in any Premier League match since David De Gea versus Arsenal back in December 2017. We all remember that game. Hats off, Hermansen was great. I think in my commentary, if I remember rightly, I called him a robot. He was like a cyborg, like he was just reaching. It was like people would shoot from any distance, any range relative to his positioning, and he'd just like stick out an arm. It's like, like just, it was unbelievable, really. Brilliant performance from him, and nobody would have been more gutted, I think, at the end than him, because, you know, he would have come away with his reputation massively enhanced had he made all of those saves and Leicester sort of earned something at Emirates Stadium. I would argue that his reputation has been hugely enhanced anyway. It was probably the first time that I'd watched Mads Hermansen play in full, and I was really, really impressed with him. Really impressed. He was brilliant. One of the players that came on for us that I think really did change the course of the game and sort of gave us a second wind, if you like, when we were starting to fade a little bit in terms of our confidence of turning the game around, was Ethan Nwaneri. And I had said in the lead up to this game that I didn't want to see him start. And I know people will come back at me for that now and say, well, look at the impact he had. Of course he should have started. No, I don't think he should have. Arsenal were creating plenty before Ethan Nwaneri came on the pitch. They went through a little bit of a lull, and then he came and breathed life back into the side. And that is exactly how I want to see Ethan Nwaneri at this stage in his career used. Because you bring him on at that late stage, and it's only win-win. If he comes on and he can't impact the game, then nobody's going to point the finger at Ethan Nwaneri and apply pressure on him and say, oh, well, he ought to have done more during the game, because we will recognise that he comes on with the game state the way it was at a very late stage in the match. But when he comes on and he does give you that second wind and breathe life into the attack and has a moment like he did when he went on that incredible dribble and then he managed to get off the shot, which Hermansen again saved down to his right, that helps, because it's confidence for Ethan Nwaneri. And then you add into it the fact that we got the result that we wanted in the end, and all of a sudden the narrative around Ethan Nwaneri is completely different. And it's really important when you're dealing with a young player that you control narratives and you make those narratives positive wherever they can be. There'll be times where they're negative and you can't avoid it. You're taking a decision to back someone, might not go the way you planned, then you can't avoid it. But in this instance, it worked out perfectly for Ethan Nwaneri, and I was really, really impressed by what I saw from him. Quick turns, sharp movement, very direct, very brave, very courageous in the way that he was playing the game, and I loved it. I really, really did. I am going to come back into the live chat in just a moment, and we'll take some of your questions for the remainder of the show. So, guys, please start getting them in. I would really, really appreciate that. Put a Q at the beginning of them. It really, really does help. If you put a question in the chat already previously, put it in again. Put the Q at the beginning, and that way I'll be able to pick them out as we go through. I just want to say as well, if you haven't done so already, guys, please leave a like on the video. I want to get to 250, 300 likes. It will be really, really appreciated. It really, really does help. Also, subscribe to the channel if you're watching us on YouTube. If you're listening on audio, leave us a review. As I mentioned earlier, we really need them right now. Also, you can check us out on patreon.com/The Chronicles of Aguna. You'll get access to more content as well as you'll be supporting us. And we've also got a Patreon In Focus pod, which is coming out either tomorrow afternoon, if I get around to finishing it today, or bright and early Tuesday morning. But there's a Patreon pod coming in the next couple of days, so you might want to sign up ahead of that so that you get access to that. And the subject of that Patreon pod is going to be Declan Rice, which is why I haven't really discussed him much on this full pod, because I want to make sure that I give you some in-depth thoughts on that on the Patreon pod that is coming. But I guess the question is, are we wasting Declan Rice at number 8? That's the question I want to explore on that In Focus pod over on our Patreon side of things. So you can sign up. Remember, patreon.com/The Chronicles of Aguna. Your support would be very, very much appreciated. Okay, last couple of things I'll say before I come into the chat and let you guys dictate the conversation for the remainder of the pod. That was really, really emotionally draining. I know I've said that a bunch of times already, but the reason I come back to that is because I do think it's something that you need to have in the reserve, like those last minute grandstand finishes. You need to have that in the reserve, because there will be times over the course of the season where you'll need to pull on that and you'll need it. But it's not something, guys, that is sustainable. Like, it's not something that we can keep doing. It's not something that we can keep pulling off. We can't keep using our reserve like that to get over the line in games that we should have been clearing. And while it's just September and I'm not massively concerned or worried about this, it is something that maybe has been a positive but also a negative. It's been a bit of a double-edged sword for us over the last few years, because that belief in our ability to do that is great, because there will be times, as I say, where you need to reach in and use that. But also, we can't allow games to get to that stage in the first place, is the point I'm trying to make here. And I worry that emotionally we're going to burn ourselves out as well as physically. And I think that happened to us not last season, because we finished last season really strong, but the season before, the 22-23 campaign, I certainly think that was the case, where we burnt out physically, we lost key players at key moments, but we also burnt out emotionally as well. And so I'm really, really conscious that we don't fall into that trap again, and I want to see that we've learned from that. As I say, in a Premier League season, in this league, in this division, where it is so competitive, you're always going to have those moments at some point. And that's why people always pull out that old line of, that's what champions do, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, you know, it's really, really important that we have that in our locker, but at the same time, you can't keep relying on that week after week after week. So, yes, hail them for the spirit that they showed. Yes, hail them for the fact that it's a never say die attitude. Hail them for the fact that they were able to get over the line in the end on this occasion. But the focus should be on what we can do to avoid those situations, rather than trying to lean into that too often, because it's simply not a sustainable way to do things. Obviously, Manchester City dropped points earlier in the day, and we talked about the significance of that. Just having a quick glance at the Premier League table now. And, of course, I'm recording this before the Sunday games take place. There are a couple of games today. Ipswich Town take on Aston Villa at Portman Road. That is a 1 o'clock kickoff. Manchester United take on Tottenham Hotspur at 4:30. That'll be an interesting watch, I think. And then, of course, there's Monday Night Football this week. Bournemouth take on Southampton. Nice derby down on the south coast. That could be tasty as well. So, yeah, I'm talking about the league table ahead of those games being played. So it's obviously subject to change a little bit. For example, Aston Villa with a win today could go up into second place. They're unlikely to get to what Liverpool have in terms of goal difference, but they can go level with them on 15 points. Manchester City are second at the moment on 14 points. Arsenal in third on 14 points. So we're level on points with Manchester City, and there's just the one goal difference between us at the minute, which, when you think about the fixtures that we've been through in recent weeks, is pretty good, and the injuries that we've had and the Champions League away trip that we had sandwiched in between as well. Given the grand scheme of things, that's a really, really good place to be. Also, Chelsea, guys. Chelsea are doing really well this season. 13 points on the board, just one less than us. They've only lost one game, they've drawn one, and they've won 4 under Enzo Maresca. Cole Palmer's in irresistible form. But yeah, just worth taking stock of where we are right now, and the fact that we're where we want to be. Maybe not where we want to be, but where we should be. Title races are not decided in September. What you need to do is make sure that you're in the hunt and you're in the race, and you go after it really big towards the back end of the season. And so you need to stay in the fight for as long as you can, and it feels like that's what we're doing. Okay, let's take then some of your questions from the live chat before we wrap up. I've got a couple from X as well that were sent in to me yesterday. I'm just going to pick a couple at random, so please don't get offended if I don't pick yours. Esun says, Harry, when Mourinho and Odegaard are fit, do you think that Partey will become a squad rotation option? I'm worried about his defensive awareness and legs nowadays. I am a bit worried about Partey on the transition these days. And I think one of the key things that we did at Tottenham and at Manchester City to cope with that was just slightly tweak the way that we played. Obviously, in the second half, we were super defensive at City, and that meant that he had small spaces to marshal. He marshalled them really well, but it's the legs thing. I don't think that overnight Thomas Partey's lost his ability to snuff out and sense danger. I just think he's physically not in a place where he can do what he used to. And so there'll be certain games and certain situations where we just need to protect him better. There were a couple of times where he got overrun in midfield yesterday, but those came, in my opinion, after Leicester had made it 2-2. So there was a real emphasis in Arsenal's play to go forward and try and find that winner. And I think naturally you leave spaces and naturally you put defensive players in isolated situations. And unfortunately for us now, Partey's just not able to do that. As I say, on the Patreon pod, remember you can sign up via the link below. We're going to talk Declan Rice, because I think that there is a chance that when Mikel Merino's fit and when Odegaard's fit, that Declan Rice drops back into the 6th position, especially in certain games. I think there's a chance that Partey's number of minutes will drop, and I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. But I also don't want to really go into Partey right now, because I did that right at the start of the season, and then he put into really good performances, and I thought, maybe I don't think you're at your best anymore, but I still think you've got a lot to offer this team, and we're going to need him over the course of the season. So let's try not to kill him off in terms of the opinion and sort of attitude towards him. Fuad says, Harry, moving forward, you leave White on the bench and start Timber at right back moving forwards. Also, Calafiori is locked in at left back from now on. He's just so silky. And I forgot to address the second yellow card point. So let's do that while we're on the subject of Calafiori, and I'll come to your question, Fuad, in just a second. Was he lucky not to be sent off? Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I could be a baby about it and say, yeah, but Ollie Skip should have been sent off for that horrible challenge in the first half, and Wilfred Ndidi kicked the ball away when on a yellow card. And there were countless examples of where players in that game could have gone off. We saw delays to the restart twice from Leicester, one where Ndidi kicked the ball away, one where they blocked a quick throw in, and nothing was done about those, funnily enough. But Calafiori, yeah, he's on a yellow card and he makes a blatant foul, and if he'd have gone, I could have had no complaints, is what I'll say to that. I don't think his initial yellow card, though, should have been a yellow card. Does that make sense? Like, I don't think he should have been awarded a yellow card for the first instance, because I think, all right, maybe pulls back at the player a little bit, but he gets so much of the ball in that instance that I think it was very harsh to give him a booking. I think they were looking at maybe the cynical nature of it, the fact that it was stopping a Leicester breakaway, and that's probably been factored into the referee's thinking. But yeah, he was fortunate. On that question though, Fuad, of would I bring White back in, I'll tell you what it means. Look, I don't think that we should be writing off Ben White. I think he's been a massive part of this team for some time now, and he's a big part of how we've got to this stage where, apart from yesterday, we're normally defensively really, really sound. So I don't want to write him off, and I don't want to say that the position is no longer his and it's been permanently handed over to Jurrien Timber. But what it does mean is that Jurrien Timber doesn't have to play Ben White doesn't have to play every single minute of every single game, which has been the case over the last couple of years. And that will do him good, because we know that there have been numerous occasions where Ben White has gone out there, done a job for the team, not fully fit. And we found out after the fact. We'd have never noticed it because he gives 100%, but we found out after the fact that he's not quite there. So if it means we can protect Ben White a bit more, then great, happy days. And if we can use Ben White as a centre-back or Timber as a centre-back and maybe give Saliba a break at times and give Gabriel a break at times, then it's all good, isn't it? But yeah. I think that it's an interesting one, but I wouldn't be making that permanent change right now. I think the competition is healthy, isn't it? Sammy Guna says, do you think that yesterday shows how much we really miss what Odegaard brings to our game? Not really. Look, I think that whenever we go into a game without Martin Odegaard, my biggest fear is a lack of creativity. I always think, like, who's going to create? Who's going to be the one that we funnel the play through? And yesterday, watching the game, I didn't feel that creativity was ever an issue. So I think there have been games in recent weeks where we've seen what we miss when Odegaard's not playing, but I don't think yesterday was one of them, just in my opinion, because creativity wasn't a problem. We created a ton of chances. We had so many efforts at goal. I think I screenshot something yesterday off of Match of the Day that I wanted to share with you guys. That reminds me nicely. Did I screenshot it or did I not capture it in time? Anyway, there was this where after the game I looked at the statistics. 75% of the ball. Our XG was over 4 goals. So, we created enough. I would argue that our XG should have been higher given the chances that we missed. But according to that, our XG was 4. We created 10 big chances and we had 37 shots at goal. Now, when you have 37 attempts at goal, 10 big chances, I don't think you can come away from the game talking too much about creativity. And I take it on board that it's Leicester and they're not that great and they're probably going to be down there fighting for their lives come the end of the season. But I think there have been games in recent weeks where we've worried about Martin Odegaard being absent. I don't think yesterday was one where I really felt it, though, if I'm being honest. Dan Alpha, good to see you, mate, at the game yesterday. He says, did you notice how fluid the formation was today? The players kept interchanging. What do you think of it? So I like the fact that there's fluidity to our formation. I like the fact that players go into different areas and swap from time to time. When Sterling came on, he was playing on the left, but there were times where he went out onto the right. You saw Trossard and Martinelli swap quite a bit. All of that's great. The only problem it can cause is in the defensive phase, and you saw it for Leicester's second goal because it's Trossard chasing back when Martinelli's the left winger. And so sometimes I think that slight hesitation and delay in going out to confront a player or to track him because you're trying to figure out who should be because you've just done some very complex interchange at the other end of the pitch, that can be a problem. And I think that's an example of where it can be an issue, but generally I think it worked really well and it probably contributed, and it's probably something we need to do more in order to compensate for what we're missing in Martin Odegaard right now. So yeah. Okay, guys, I think I am going to leave it there. Thank you all so much for joining me on this episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. We'll be back tomorrow with another show, of course. Don't forget to leave a like on the video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're brand spanking new as well. Check us out on Patreon. The link is in the description below. There's a Declan Rice pod coming your way over the next couple of days. Also, check out nordvpn.com/ChroniclesAFC to access your mega discount, an exclusive offer available to you as listeners of the Chronicles of a Gooner. As I say, it was way too stressful for a September afternoon, but Arsenal get over the line, put another 3 points on the board, and can turn all their attentions now to PSG on Tuesday. What a game that promises to be under the lights at Emirates Stadium. We're going to get some insider knowledge on PSG on tomorrow's episode. I'll be joined by Quentin Jesper, a French football writer and a very good friend of mine, French football expert. He will give us the download on Paris Saint-Germain, what we can expect from them, and he'll provide some context to their season so far. It's really, really easy to look at stats, look at where they are in the league and draw conclusions, but what's the actual context? Where are they actually at? What are people in France saying about them right now? We'll get all of that from Quentin tomorrow, and I look forward to bringing you guys that. Until then, take care of yourselves, have a great day, and I will see you all on the next one. Up the Arsenal. Goodbye.